It was supposed to be a peaceful summit, a gathering of the most advanced species in the galaxy, a time for fragile alliances to strengthen and old wounds to heal. But when one arrogant ambassador humiliated Earth's envoy before billions of viewers, one off-duty human marine said for simple words. Pause. Music swells. Cut to Marine standing in a crowd, smirking as he hands off his beer. Hold. My beer. By dawn, the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. Every 5 years, the Galactic Council convened its Grand Summit. A convocation unlike any other in the galaxy, not merely a gathering of ambassadors, but a contest of power, influence, and survival. 212 species held seats upon the council, empires and republics, hierarchies and hives, ancient and young. Each vying for advantage. Each guarding secrets. Each with blood on their hands. The summit was held aboard Concordia Prime, a neutral station orbiting the gas giant Shylares, its massive storms visible even from orbit. Concordia was itself a relic, a fusion of engineering from a dozen long-dead species, its purpose now one of cold diplomacy rather than war. It was here that alliances were made and broken, where treaties were forged and undermined, where grievances simmered beneath the polite rituals of galactic civilization. And among the elder races, one new presence had begun to cast an outsized shadow. The humans. Barely a century into their interstellar age, humanity had risen with an unsettling speed. Where other species had taken millennia to master the jump drives, human scientists had done it in a generation. Where others expanded cautiously, Earth's fleets had raced across the stars, establishing colonies on barren worlds, in asteroid fields, in orbitals older than history itself. But it wasn't merely their technology that unsettled the ancient powers. It was their spirit. Humans were different. Too adaptable. Too unpredictable. Too resistant to the hierarchies the elder species had long taken for granted. To many of the Council, humanity represented a force they could neither assimilate nor suppress. And so, they watched the Terrans with wary eyes. Some in admiration. More in resentment. At the head of the human delegation stood Ambassador Juliet Navarro. Brilliant. Calculating. Fiercely loyal to Earth's cause. She was no stranger to the shifting tides of council politics, nor to the dangers of standing tall among elder species who saw humanity as an upstart race of barbarians. But Navarro understood this summit would be different. It was here, today, that Earth might secure its greatest diplomatic victory yet, full voting rights on the Council. Such rights would give humanity influence equal to the eldest empires. Access to restricted hyperlanes. Power over interstellar law. Recognition as a peer, not a tolerated outsider. But power breeds enemies. And among those who most opposed Earth's rise was the Vraka Dominion, an empire of martial reptilian warlords, whose hierarchies of dominance stretched back hundreds of thousands of years. The Vraka despised humanity for many reasons, for their insolence, for their refusal to accept Vraka superiority, for their refusal to bow to proper order, but above all, because they could not control them. At the forefront of this hatred stood Ambassador Kraxel, a towering, four-eyed reptilian noble whose words carried weight among both allies and rivals alike. Kraxel's disdain for Earth was legendary. In private, he referred to humans as feral apes in stolen ships. In council chambers, he had worked tirelessly to block Earth's initiatives, poison their alliances, and undermine their progress. And at this summit, Kraxel came prepared with a plan to humiliate Earth's ambassador, to remind the galaxy that humans were lesser, and to ensure once and for all that humanity's bid for power would be crushed before it could take root. Billions watched the summit live through holoscreens, neural feeds, and transmissions that stretched from the Council core worlds to the outermost colonies. This was humanity's moment. Nevarro knew it. Her allies knew it. And her enemies knew it too. When Nevarro rose to speak before the assembly, the chamber fell silent, a rare thing in that hall of ancient voices. With calm authority, she began, "Esteemed delegates, honored peers, the Terran Confederation comes before this council in the spirit of peace, of cooperation, but before she could continue, a deep, hissing voice cut across the chamber. Loud. Public. Deliberate. Craxel. Save your words, human. The tone was pure contempt. The phrasing, chosen with care. We know your kind. Primitive. Violent. Feral apes who mimic the ways of elder species without understanding. You do not belong here, not among the enlightened. Not upon this council. The insult struck like a thunderclap. Across the chamber, elder species murmured in shock. Some in approval. Some in discomfort. But none interrupted. And across the stars, through 1,000 relay stations, the insult echoed into billions of minds. A public humiliation. A calculated strike. Nevarro held her poise with iron discipline. But within her, fury burned. She could not answer in kind, not here, not now, not without costing Earth the alliances so carefully forged. She remained silent. Unbowed, but unable to strike back. For a long moment, there was only stillness. And among those watching from the upper galleries was a detachment of off-duty Terran Marines. Unofficial. Not part of the diplomatic mission. There for security, for presence, and for the simple honor of representing Earth. Among them sat Sergeant Jack Forrest. Veteran of 2 colonial wars. Graduate of the Terran Expeditionary Forces. A soldier's soldier. He had fought not for medals or accolades, but because he believed in Earth, in its future, and in the simple truth that no human should ever kneel to arrogance. When Craxel's words reached him, something deep within Forrest stirred. Rage. Yes. Pride. Of course. But most of all, resolve. There were things a human could tolerate. Arrogance. Condescension. Even envy. But a public insult to one's people, in front of the galaxy, that was something else entirely. Without a word, Forrest rose. Set his drink aside. Turned to his squad mates. His voice was low. Calm. Absolute. Hold my beer. And with those 4 words, the course of the summit, and the galaxy, began to shift. Jack Forrest was not a diplomat. He had no patience for the endless word games, for the subtle threats and posturing that filled the council chambers. He left such things to people like Juliet Nevarro, who played them masterfully. Forrest was a Marine. A soldier. A man of action forged in the fires of Earth's wars and hardened in the blackness between stars. Born on the outer colony of Vega's Reach, Forrest had grown up watching the Terran frontier expand, a new world every decade, a new challenge every year. It was on those edges of civilization that humanity had first clashed with the unknown. Pirates. Raiders. Xeno-slavers. the occasional predator from beyond mapped space. And each time, humans had stood their ground. Sometimes alone. Sometimes outgunned. But never bowed. Never broken. Forrest had volunteered young, earning his first combat ribbons on the ice moons of Hecata 3, where an uprising of rogue warlords had threatened Terran trade routes. He had seen what happened when the elder species deemed humanity a problem. He had fought beside comrades who never came home. And he had learned one truth: above all, when you were human, respect was never given. It had to be earned. And once earned, defended. So when Forrest heard Kraxel's words, not in a private insult, not in a closed-door exchange, but across a galaxy-wide broadcast, something old and primal rose within him. The words were more than an insult to Navarro. They were a strike at everything humanity had built. At every soldier who had bled for Earth's place in the stars. At every citizen who dreamed of a future where their children might stand equal among the stars. Forrest could have ignored it. Could have trusted that time and diplomacy would erase the slight. But deep down, he knew that was a lie. This was a test. One the elder species were watching closely. And if humanity failed to answer, they would be forever branded as weak. As prey. In the quiet of the observation gallery, Forrest rose. Not in anger, though his veins burned with it, but in purpose. Without a word, he stepped away from his squad mates. They exchanged looks, knowing him well. One leaned in, voice low, "Jack. You're not serious." Forrest simply glanced back. A faint smile. The kind a man wears when fate has already chosen the path ahead. "Hold my beer," he said. The words were a Terran idiom, one that, over the years, had become famous across the colonies. A signal of reckless intent. Of courage unbound by caution. Of a willingness to do what must be done, regardless of consequence. And as Forrest strode from the gallery, the die was cast. He had no plan, no orders, no mandate. Only instinct. Only purpose. The Galactic Council Station, Concordia Prime, was a fortress. A place of diplomacy, yes, but also one of strict neutrality, with security systems designed by a dozen species to prevent violence. No weapons allowed. No armor. No military forces beyond ceremonial guards. But Jack Forrest didn't need weapons. He was the weapon. A lifetime of combat. A mind sharpened by the lessons of 100 battlefields. And the uniquely human gift the elder species still failed to understand: audacity. Forrest moved through the station with practiced ease. He knew the rhythms of security patrols, the blind spots in surveillance. And he knew that in the heart of the summit, among the throngs of thousands, even a single determined man could vanish in plain sight. His destination was clear: the Vraka flagship. Fang of Dominion. A warship of ancient design, bristling with weapons and cloaked in a history of conquest. A vessel designed to remind all who saw it that the Vraka were not merely diplomats, they were conquerors. And aboard that ship was Kraxel, the architect of the insult. Forrest knew the risks. Knew that if caught, he would be disavowed. That if he failed, he might spark a war that Earth could not yet win. But some things mattered more than safety. More than caution. More than politics. He moved through the lower tiers of the station, bypassing civilian traffic routes and entering the maintenance sectors, places where only engineers and service crews were meant to tread. The air here was thick with ozone and grease. The hum of power conduits masked the sound of his steps. Forrest moved like a shadow, a predator among prey. Security checkpoints lay ahead. Barriers of both technology and biology. Vraka guards, towering reptiles in ceremonial armor, watched over the docking bays. They were not lax. The Dominion trained its soldiers well. But they were also arrogant, confident that no one would dare approach their berth unchallenged. Forrest exploited that arrogance. A shift change here. A blind corner there. A technician's badge borrowed from an unwatched terminal. Within minutes, he was past the outer cordons, moving into the darkened approach tunnels that led to the Fang's main airlocks. And still, no alarms. No alerts. Because even in a galaxy of ancient empires, no one truly expected that a human would dare such a thing. The Fang of Dominion. A relic of conquest. 60 decks of brutal design, each etched with the triumphs of the Vraka Dominion. Its hull bore the scars of 1,000 battles, not hidden, but displayed, polished, framed beneath armor glass panels as symbols of pride. To board such a ship was to enter the lair of the galaxy's most ruthless warriors. And yet, one human, unarmed, uninvited, unafraid, now stalked its darkened passages. Jack Forrest. Getting aboard had not been simple. The Vraka were not fools, their ship was locked in high-security moorings. But even the most arrogant species could not plan for a determined human with nothing to lose. It had taken Forrest nearly an hour to bypass the dockside seals, moving through ancient maintenance tunnels designed centuries before, when Concordia had served as a warship staging ground. The maps were outdated. The power relays unstable. But Forrest adapted. Humans always adapted. When the final bulkhead hissed open and he stepped into the Fang's lower service decks, a cold stillness gripped him. No alarms. No footsteps. No welcoming committee. Good. He moved swiftly, staying to shadowed maintenance corridors. Here the air smelled of metal and scale, the scent of Vraka biology woven into every inch of the vessel. Crawling through conduit spaces no Vraka soldier would even consider, Forrest ascended toward the ship's upper decks. Because it was there, among the command levels, that Kraxel's secrets would lie. And Forrest had come for more than confrontation. He needed proof. Evidence that could not be denied. That would turn the elder species' own laws against one of their most feared ambassadors. As he advanced, Forrest observed the Vraka carefully. They moved with the casual arrogance of those who believed themselves unassailable. Guards stood in pairs at key junctures, tall, scaled, brutal. But their patrols were rigid. Predictable. No warrior expected a lone human, especially not one acting without orders. And so, Forrest remained unseen. On deck 47, a pair of engineers, smaller Vraka caste workers, passed by him in a side corridor, oblivious. He waited. Counted the seconds. Slipped past. No fear. Only focus. At last, he reached the data core vault, a massive chamber where the ship's political archives were maintained. Here, among encrypted files and diplomatic communiques, Kraxel's ambitions were laid bare. Forrest had no need for finesse. Humans had long since learned that even the most sophisticated alien systems could be broken if one was determined enough. A bypass here. A hard-line splice there. Tools improvised from maintenance kits. A technique taught in the backrooms of Earth's Black Ops training halls. Within minutes, the firewalls crumbled. The data flowed. And what Forrest saw in those files ignited a slow, cold fury within him. This was no simple political rivalry. No petty slander. Kraxell was a cancer. His influence woven through bribery, extortion, and blood. Documents revealed secret arms shipments to rogue warlords, factions who had attacked human colonies. Illegal slave trade routes routed through supposedly the neutral council space. Assassination plots targeting rising human-aligned diplomats. And worse, a conspiracy to trigger conflicts between fledgling human allies, undermining Earth's fragile alliances from within. It was treachery of the highest order. Proof that the Vraka's honor was a lie. That their empire was rotting beneath the veneer of tradition. Forrest acted quickly. The files were compressed, encoded, then transmitted through secure bursts to the Terran intelligence net. Soon, Earth's analysts would have the evidence. Soon, the truth would be known. But Forrest was not done. Kraxell's public insult demanded a reply. One that words alone could not deliver. And humans, they answered insults personally. Navigating through the upper decks, Forrest moved now with grim purpose. Past ornate halls where Vraka nobility strutted. Past trophy galleries of conquered races. Until he stood before the great archway leading into the ambassadorial throne room, Kraxell's private domain aboard the ship. He would confront the Vraka here. Alone. Without backup. Without hesitation. Because when a human said, "Hold my beer," it was never an empty boast. It was a vow. A promise. And in moments, Jack Forrest would keep it. The ambassadorial throne room aboard the Fang of Dominion was no mere audience chamber. It was a calculated display of Vraka might, a vaulted space of black iron and blood-red banners, with relics of fallen enemies mounted upon the walls. To enter such a place, uninvited, unannounced, was an act of open defiance. A challenge. A declaration. And yet, the great doors slid open. And through them strode Jack Forrest. No armor. No weapons. Only his marine's fatigues, and an unshakable resolve. At the center of the room, surrounded by aides and guards, sat Ambassador Kraxell, clad in ceremonial war robes, his scaled bulk resting upon a blackened throne carved from the hull of a warship he had once conquered. He had no reason to suspect a lone human would dare set foot here. No alarms had sounded. No guards had given warning. But now, the impossible had happened. For a moment, Kraxell froze, his for-crimson eyes narrowing in disbelief. Then, fury. A deep, echoing snarl shook the chamber. Guards surged forward, weapons drawn, shock rods crackling with lethal current. "Seize him!" Kraxell roared, voice booming with primal rage. But Jack Forrest did not flinch. Did not retreat. His voice was calm. Even. Cutting through the chaos with unshakable purpose, "You insulted my people," he said. "You disgraced our ambassador before the galaxy. Before billions." A pause, eyes locked upon Kraxell's. "And now, I'm here to return the favor." In his palm, Forrest held a small, nondescript device, a pulse transmitter, linked into Concordia Prime's open holofeed. A single touch, and the encrypted files he had stolen began to stream. Into the council chambers. Into civilian networks. Into military channels. Across worlds, stations, colonies. Billions watched, and what they saw shattered the false image of Vraka honor. First came the documents, cold, damning, bribes paid to council delegates. Backroom deals with criminal syndicates. The sale of advanced weaponry to known terrorists. Then, visual recordings, slave auctions, hidden in the shadows of council space. Human prisoners, tortured for sport. A whispered conversation, Craxel himself, plotting to destabilize Terran alliances through assassination. The chamber grew still. Guards froze in place, confusion and fear battling centuries of conditioned loyalty. Craxel rose from his throne, claws flexing in rage. "You dare," he roared, lunging toward Forrest, eyes blazing with murderous intent. But Forrest was faster. Decades of training. Innate human agility. The will of a man with nothing left to lose. In a fluid motion, he evaded the charge, driving his shoulder into the ambassador's gut, sending the Vraka crashing backward into his own throne. The great warrior, the feared voice of the Dominion, lay stunned, gasping for breath. And before the stunned gaze of his guards, before the eyes of the entire council, Jack Forrest spoke. Voice clear. Calm. Resonant. "Humans will stand for many things," he said. "We will tolerate much. But we will not be humiliated. Not by you. Not by anyone." A pause. A final glance down at Craxel. "Consider this," Gower replied. He stepped back, letting the feed fade, the message delivered. No blood spilled, only truth laid bare. A truth that would burn through the council like wildfire. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, chaos. Emergency summons from council chambers. Frantic communications among the elder races. Vraka delegates scrambling to distance themselves from the scandal. And amid the storm, one human, unarmed and unafraid, calmly strode from the Vraka flagship. No guard dared stop him. No warrior moved to challenge him. Because in that moment, the galaxy had learned a truth it would never forget, when a human said, "Hold my beer." It was not a jest. It was a promise. News traveled through the stars faster than light, faster than any ship or fleet. By the close of that day, what had begun as a single human's defiant act had become the greatest diplomatic upheaval in recent memory. Across the core worlds and colonies of the Galactic Council, every channel echoed with the same transmission: the fall of Ambassador Craxel. The exposure of Vraka corruption. And the simple, unvarnished voice of a lone human marine who had dared to speak for his people. In the inner halls of the council, chaos reigned. The Vraka delegation was in disarray, their senior ministers in emergency session, trying desperately to salvage what remained of their fractured influence. But the damage was done. The Vraka could not silence the truth. Not this time. Too many eyes had seen. Too many minds had heard. The illusion of their unassailable honor was broken. Within hours, allied factions began to shift. The Zethari, ancient crystalline intellects once bound by treaty to the Vraka, withdrew their support, citing grievous violations of interstellar law. The Solthari clusters, vast hive collectives that traded in secrets, began leaking even more damning evidence, long-buried scandals linked to the Dominion's highest warlords. Even the stoic Sorinax dynasties, whose cold-blooded neutrality was legendary, issued an unprecedented statement: no race that indulges in such dishonor may claim moral authority within this council. Yet it was not only the elder races that reacted. Across the far colonies, among the young, hungry civilizations who had once looked to humanity with skepticism, a new respect began to take root. Here was proof that Earth's people would not kneel to ancient powers. That they would not be cowed by threats, nor silenced by political games. And for many, in systems long neglected by the great empires, Forrest's words became a rallying cry. In the Great Council Security Directorate, secret assessments began at once. Analysts pored over human history, military engagements, colonial responses, the psychological profiles of Terran leaders. It was not the first time humans had defied expectations. There had been the Livari incident, when human traders broke a 3-century blockade through sheer stubborn will. There had been the Kalos Rift, where a single Terran destroyer held off an entire pirate armada. There had been the Treaty of Mina, forged after human diplomats brokered peace between 3 warring factions no one believed reconcilable. Again and again, humanity had demonstrated a dangerous truth: when provoked, they acted. Not always with force. Not always with violence. But always decisively. And always on their own terms. A closed session of the Directorate convened in the shadowed vaults beneath the council chambers. There, amid the cold analysis of probabilities and threat matrices, a new classification was recorded: humanity, maximum potential threat. A designation reserved for only the most volatile, most capable of civilizations, those who, if angered or pushed, could alter the balance of the entire galactic order. The announcement was not made public. The elder races understood the need for subtlety. But the message spread, whispered through the embassies, carried in the subtext of new treaties. And in every military high command, a new directive was quietly added to strategic handbooks: when dealing with humans, tread carefully. And whatever you do, never underestimate the words, "Hold my beer." In the days that followed, the ripples from that one bold act did not fade. They grew. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds and habitats, the phrase had already begun to spread: "Hold my beer." A human idiom, once obscure, now understood by species who could barely speak Earth's tongues. And with it came a new understanding, that behind humanity's charm, behind their strange customs and unruly independence, there lay a will of iron. Ambassador Juliet Navarro returned to the council floor with her head held high. She had not ordered Forrest's actions, no, that would have been political suicide. But she did not deny them, either. When pressed by reporters and rival ambassadors, she answered with quiet, measured words: Sergeant Forrest acted alone. Without orders. But with the heart of every human who refuses to kneel to arrogance. A perfect response. Balanced. Diplomatic. But beneath that surface, the glint of satisfaction could not be hidden. For in her heart, Navarro knew the tide had turned. Earth's delegation, once dismissed by many as upstart barbarians, now found itself courted by new allies. Species who had once hesitated to side with humanity now saw the wisdom of standing beside those who dared to act. Trade agreements long stalled were suddenly revived. Treaties were re-examined with fresh eyes. And though no formal vote was called, not yet, the unspoken truth hung in the air: humanity's place on the council was no longer in question. As for Jack Forrest, his return to Earth was quiet. There were no medals. No grand parade. Officially, he had violated council security protocols. The brass could not be seen condoning such recklessness. But in every Terran Marine barracks, in every colonial outpost where word of the summit had reached, Forrest's name was already legend. One man. One moment. One line heard across the stars. Hold my beer. Among his comrades, Forrest found himself the subject of endless toasts. In bars and mess halls from Mars to Vega's reach, Marines lifted drinks in his honor. Among civilians, songs were written first as humor, then as tribute. And on the frontier worlds, where humanity's resilience was a daily struggle, the phrase became a rallying cry. But legends come with a price. Forrest now lived under scrutiny, his every move watched by intelligence services, his reputation both shield and chain. There were factions on Earth, politicians, diplomats, who feared what his fame might inspire. And beyond, there were elder species who now saw him as a symbol of human defiance and a threat. In a quiet meeting on Lunar Base, Navarro herself visited Forrest. There, without cameras, without aides, they spoke as equals. "You changed the game," she told him. "But you made enemies, Jack. And not all of them will strike openly." Forrest only smiled, that same faint grin that had carried him into the heart of a Vraka warship. "Let them come," he said. "And tell them, hold my beer." And so it was that among the stars, a simple truth became legend: when humans say hold my beer, you would be wise to listen. And wiser still, to step aside. So, what do you think? Could one person really shift the entire galactic balance with a bit of guts and a well-placed data file? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this crazy story of human ingenuity and just a touch of recklessness, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe for more insane tales from the stars, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next adventure. You won't regret it.